Hey, I'm Mitch Cohen, also on the board of GAIN. Thank you very much for coming. As Stephanie said, we're videotaping this. It will go on to our series of educational events on YouTube. When Nathan starts asking for questions, just raise your hand. I'll bring you a microphone and you can speak it. If you don't want to speak it into the microphone, we want to make sure the questions get recorded. That's fine, just yell out without a microphone. Your voice won't be recorded, and then either myself or Nathan will repeat the questions, so those watching later will have an idea of what's going on. GAIN stands for Greater Assabet Indivisible Network. We're part of the nationwide Indivisible group. We have events every month. Our next main event is on the 30th, Tuesday the 30th of December. We're meeting, it's just a general business meeting, if you will, at the Northborough Public Library. Everyone is welcome to attend, and we'll be putting together an agenda for that in the very near future. And other than that, we have a standouts on Wednesday night in front of the old town hall from 5:30 to 6:30. Keep an eye on the mailing list for any changes to that due to weather or anything else. And I think that's about it for housekeeping. I'd like to introduce Nathan Lockwood. Nathan gave a talk very recently at the Northborough Democratic Town Committee meeting about how Massachusetts can be a beacon of just good things potentially for the country, but really the good things that are sort of meandering through the legislature and petitions and everything else. And Stephanie is also on that committee, and we looked at each other afterwards and said, we need to have Nathan come and do an educational talk for GAIN, sort of an expanded version of that, or whatever comes to mind, because Nathan always has very, very good ideas. I will allow him to introduce himself a little bit more, and with that, Nathan.
Thanks a lot.
Great stuff. Thank you.
All right, hey everybody, it's great to be here. Excited to hear what you folks are thinking and share some thoughts. So just a couple of things before I get started. So it's always a joy to come to Northborough and meet with the folks here. A little bit about myself. I was, let's see, I live in Lunenburg, Mass, north of Worcester, here by Leominster and Fitchburg. I've lived in Massachusetts now for about a little over 30 years. I got a couple kids that my wife and I raised here. They live closer to Boston. Yeah, so, you know, a lot of our lives were focused on, you know, family, raising kids. And when they went to college, I was in the tech industry working for about 25 years. Not like, I wasn't like Elon Musk or anything, just like a mid-level employee or whatever, putting, you know, food on the table and that sort of thing. When my kids went to college, I was a philosophy major and kind of involved in kind of activist-y things and kind of civic thoughts and whatnot. And I thought it'd be cool to, you know, maybe get involved with some things. So when my kids went to college, I started getting involved again. And I ended up joining an organization that was just forming called Voter Choice Massachusetts, that was looking to, you know, give voters more choice and more power collectively in elections with ranked choice voting. As joining that as a volunteer, I got to go a lot of cool places that I might not have gone just on my own, and including right here. I came and I tabled at the Solar Jazz Festival twice, and for 2 or 3 times actually. I got the T-shirts to go with it. Still wear them a lot. They're really cool. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, as Mitch said, I've had a great pleasure of meeting with the DTC here a bunch of times. And I've probably been here a few other times, but anyways, really, thank you so much for having me today. I also want to just thank GAIN and Indivisible and the DTC and folks in Northborough in general for everything you've been doing, and thank you for organizing your individual lives around organizing together for a better future. In all my interactions with Indivisible networks in Massachusetts, I see folks creating community and ongoing relationships that also have, you know, discussion about, the needs of their community, how we can improve the way we do things in Massachusetts, and how we can, have more fun together. And it's super important that that folks take a lead on getting each other off the couch and meeting each other, and it makes all our lives better. So I want to thank you for that. And so it's great to, I've enjoyed being part of different things in Massachusetts. Through my work with Voter Choice Massachusetts, I've gotten to work in coalition with a lot of different people and groups. And it's been great to learn together and kind of be on this journey together. So I want to start with a question here. So you folks, most of the folks here are part of GAIN or something like GAIN. And what are your kind of biggest goals? What does the GAIN community, right in this moment, what are you most strongly trying to achieve through your work? And you could just kind of shout out or whatever for now. Awesome. Yeah.
I will repeat these. Is this on already? There we go. I just want to repeat what was yelled out from the audience so it gets recorded and people know. Fighting authoritarianism, fighting ICE and anything that's like ICE, and I missed the third thing that somebody yelled out. Fighting Trump. That's that.
Great. Yeah. No, and that is, I don't need to tell you. I'm more thank you for the role you've taken in doing that. I think, the role that GAIN and Indivisible and 5150 and people like yourselves organizing under different groups and in different ways, but it's been both inspiring and, necessary and like kind of helping save our butts that you guys have been doing all the work you've been doing, making resistance an actual thing and not just an idea, something we should do, but making it actually happen and on a scale that's, kind of unprecedented. And so, big thanks to you. Give yourselves, I hope you feel great about what you've shown. And as you know, without the leadership you folks have taken to bring people together, bring them off their couches instead of being alone and afraid and angry at home on their couch, being out there in force where people see that and see that it's so many people that don't accept these things. If we get out of it, it's going to be a big reason. Your work is going to have been a big reason why. So thank you to that. So I'm, and I also want to just add, like I've mentioned working with Voter Choice Massachusetts on ranked choice voting, which was a pretty new idea. For most people hadn't ever heard of it. It's about changing how we vote. That's kind of a big deal and a little scary. Like, if you care about democracy and, voting's the foundation of it, any idea about changing that better be a really good one. And I want to say that, when Voter Choice Massachusetts was in the process of growing from 3 people to like 50,000 people, starting a few years ago, one of the inflection points was as Voter Choice Massachusetts got out into communities and was talking to kind of people who were most active on democracy issues in their community, so Indivisible groups being a prime example. That's really what created an inflection point in Voter Choice Massachusetts growth, was sharing their ideas about why this was good, answering people's questions, in many cases inspiring them about another hopeful thing that they could think about to make life like a little better for regular people, a little bit more the way they wanted. And so you guys Indivisible made a huge impact on Voter Choice Massachusetts work. And I remember in middle of 2019, for example, one of the ways this growth in awareness and growth in strength of that movement was shown was a couple things. There had been in previous sessions some bills in the legislature, but there's thousands of bills in the legislature, and they were amongst the thousands. They didn't have a ton of co-sponsorship or whatnot. In 2019, after a few years of Voter Choice Massachusetts sort of organizing and educating around the topic, and with Indivisible getting increasingly involved, there was now 2 bills with a combined like 90 co-sponsors in the legislature. They were real bills at that point that were a real conversation. They had a lobby day for this, and there was like over 300 people turned out for that lobby day. And it was clear that working together, the pro-democracy space, the folks that were working on that issue of ranked choice voting had come together to effectively sort of start to up-level the Commonwealth as a whole awareness of the opportunity to improve democracy. So what I want to talk about today, and resisting authoritarianism, which is in this moment one of the things Indivisible has taken the lead on. I'm going to make the case, and you don't have to agree with me. It's a totally friendly conversation that ultimately resisting authoritarianism is going to take more than just resisting authoritarianism. It's resisting authoritarianism is absolutely necessary. It's first order. It's top priority. If you don't do it, I mean, we see how fast the Trump administration wants to move. And just to be clear, I'm speaking on behalf of Nathan Lockwood. I am a director at Rank the Vote, which is an organization I co-founded. That's a national organization. We work with like Voter Choice Massachusetts, like organizations in 30 states. And I'm a volunteer for Voter Choice Massachusetts. I'm very excited about both of those, but I'm going to own everything I say today, and we're not going to put it on the organizations I work with. But what I want to talk about is why, in my opinion, we absolutely need the resistance. It's front and center. And then if we want to be successful in the long term, we need to do some other things. All right, sorry, I'm just gonna, whoops. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna use some notes today because I don't want to rely on my memory. All right, so this is a pretty bold claim I've made, and I'm not trying to exhaust you guys because I know resisting authoritarianism is a full-time job in its own right, so I totally get it. And not everybody has to do everything, so let me just get those things out there. But why do I think that resisting it in the long term is going to require more than just resisting authoritarianism or restoring the institutions that preceded the authoritarian turn? So here's some thoughts. So there's reasons why MAGA did not just become a movement, but became arguably the largest, most powerful movement in America and the standard bearer for many voters, including many working class voters, a phenomenon that leaves many of us, I think, scratching our heads, right? MAGA's success relies on narratives, stories, interpretations of history and the present that connect relatably to people's lives. I think most of the folks here would say that these MAGA narratives are distortions of reality, guided by political motivations, but many of them have a grain or more of truth. I think I'm realizing I wrote this, most of us is a phrase I'm going to use in this one. Most of us here, perhaps not all, is human beings that believe that we all share a strong bond with everyone as humans and that we have more in common than what separates us. We believe that we can live in civility, community, and mutual respect with each other.
I just have a quick question. Can I talk to this?
Sure, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, thanks for asking. And I'm fine with that. So, yeah, we believe that we can live with people that are different with us, whether they're from a different part of the world or whatever. They have different beliefs than us, different political beliefs, religious beliefs, whatever. And we're in a beautiful place to be talking about this today, a place that has really lived that example, where people have really lived that example. So as people who hold that view, and just as people who want to understand the forces that are driving different people to do what they do, especially when it's not what we ourselves might do as individuals or as groups, we have to ask ourselves, why are some people doing this thing? So why are there so many folks backing MAGA? And I'm sure everybody here has thought about this, so I know I'm not the only one. And that's our own way of truth-seeking, as we ask ourselves these questions. So I think there's a general consensus that globalization has been a major force driving support for the MAGA movement and similar movements globally. A feeling and a reality of a level of dislocation in people's lives that in some cases has either caused them, some kind of real harm or perceived harm. And many non-MAGA, it's not just MAGA folk, everyone who feels that becomes MAGA, and everyone who doesn't. A lot of non-MAGA folks feel the same way, but attribute it to different causes or react to it differently or look for different types of solutions. And there's some cases where MAGA folks and non-MAGA folks are even looking for some of the same solutions, even while they are in radical disagreement on other solutions. So MAGA narratives blame this on global elites, including Democrats, who they like to lump in with the global elites, and rhinos, Republicans in name only. And in taking power, Donald Trump destroyed the old order within his party. Remarkable. You don't see things like this very often. He purged the rhinos, but the Dems are still pretty much the same Dems. Meaning the Democratic Party hasn't radically changed, and the MAGA base still blames them for, being part of the exercising the will of the global elite that they feel is responsible for a lot of their problems. So many MAGA narratives are focused on the Dems as the remaining source of the problems. The efficacy of those narratives is partly based on events, things that have happened over history, and maybe what some Dems have done in the past. Some people might point to like Bill Clinton supporting NAFTA or whatever, and the MAGA folks might say, see, the Democrats helped drive this stuff forward too. They were working with the rhinos, whatever. But a big part of the success of these MAGA narratives is based on their highlighting and interpreting what some Dems are doing in the present and claiming that is what Dems do. Now, Democrats, being a coalition ranging from Michael Bloomberg and Liz Cheney to Ilhan Omar and Zoran Mamdani, provides, and people in between, provides a range of diverse material for a range of diverse messages, meaning, sort of the right side of the Democratic Party does, and say stuff about that, or they can point to the left side and scare people based on that, or they can point to the middle and say, look, they don't do anything about that. Like they've got a lot to work with there. And again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on the Democratic Party. I'm just, it's politics and people make hay with other people's stuff. So the case I'd like to make with you now very briefly, just as background and context for the rest of what I'd like to talk about, is that one of the biggest, most critical weapons in the MAGA narrative arsenal feeds on some very specific evidence: the performance of democratic government in the places where they hold power and the lives and experiences of the people living in those places. It goes back to one of Trump's most powerful lines back in 2016 to vulnerable voters on the fence, which was, hey, what have you got to lose, So you see this 1-2 punch. And that line he gave, I think, while he was campaigning in cities and in American cities that are typically, most cities in America are pretty blue. They have Democratic Party leaning councils and mayors and whatnot. And that was one of his lines. So you see, and I think for a lot of Americans that had a really negative feelings about their experience of, the last 20 years, their job prospects, all that kind of stuff, that resonated. They're like, yeah, what do we have to lose? This guy's going to shake things up or whatever. And his message was, he was claiming that Democrats are ruining the places that they control. That's his claim. I'm not saying that's entirely true, but that's what he was claiming. And this narrative feeds into other MAGA scapegoating narratives. But the part where it is really dangerous for Dem-leaning or non-MAGA is where it overlaps with their own values. The problems that they also see as problems, including things like non-affordability of life's essentials, like housing, groceries. The failure of, the tremendous reduction today in social mobility and access to the American dream, costs of things like education and healthcare, unreliable, expensive, or ineffective transportation systems that make it difficult for people to do what they need to do, sometimes there's things like social disorder and unrest, persistent problems like homelessness, mental health and drug abuse, and epidemics, which are out there for everybody to see, and they've been there a long time now, and they are affecting a lot of people's lives. And, no one's solved them, not Democrats, not Republicans. They're tough problems, but they're there. And in some places, they're very visible. So an overall what we're talking about here is an overall feeling of personal and financial insecurity. And then, of course, there's other stuff that is going to freak people out, like artificial intelligence, the environment, wars, potential wars. If you want to get freaked out at home, it's real easy to do, I think, as most of us know, and good on everybody for, taking that and putting it to constructive use and not letting yourself get too dragged down by it and being able to channel that energy into all your work you're doing in your communities. So we don't have to agree with MAGA on much to agree, I think, that these are real problems for large swaths of the population. Maybe if you live in a luxurious part of Boston with no kids, making over $150K a year, you can take an Uber to the airport real quick. The rest of your family's in a similar situation. Maybe somehow you're not touched by this. But nowadays, few jobs are totally secure. AI doesn't have bodies yet, but we can all feel it breathing down our necks. Which isn't to say it's an entirely bad thing, but there are these dangerous sides of it. There are very few of us who are not feeling some level of real insecurity. So when we look out and we see that, the states that are controlled by the resistance, the people standing up for democracy, the Democrats right now, like Massachusetts and California, New York and Illinois, still have these problems, and not just like a little bit. And that they've persisted a long time. What it tells the public is that Democrats do not have a model anywhere of how to make government and society work for them. It makes them real jaded and feeling like the Democrats don't have the answer no matter what they say. It's like, listen, I don't follow all these arguments. I don't follow these arguments. I spend most of my time working. But you can't tell me you have all the answers if you've controlled this, the wealthiest state in the country, California, or one of the wealthiest per capita, Massachusetts, and you've controlled it for decades, and we still got these problems. In fact, our affordability problem's worse. A bunch of our folks are moving down to North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, because they can't afford to live up here anymore. So that's the kind of logic that is hurting the Democrats right now, and hurting, I would say, I think we would feel, hurting us as a result because of the support it gives to MAGA. So the sense of it, regular people's sense of this, and maybe yours sometimes too, is that the Democratic Party rules not like MAGA. They're not you're not as afraid of them taking your liberties away, but it's not of, by, and for the people, because it's ineffective even in delivering on its own goals and stated values so often. And just as an example, think about all the strong environmental activism that's been going on in Massachusetts now for decades. I'm looking for my glasses. Janet, is that you in the front row? Maybe it's not. No, it's not. Sorry. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see people. Well, folks like yourselves, raise your hand if you've been involved in the environmental movement in Massachusetts. There you go. And I'm sure even if you weren't directly involved, you've been supporting some important stuff. I remember when I was tabling at the Solar Jazz Festival, we had 350.org right across from us, and Charlene from the Green Party walking around, and people care about the environment here. I was just getting a glass of water, and on the paper towel dispenser, it had a little sign that said, this is a tree dispenser, you only use what you need. So people here care about the environment. Yet at the same time, and the Massachusetts legislature has passed some landmark legislation a couple years ago. it was really hard to get that passed. A lot of people like yourselves worked really hard on that, and organizations that represent that issue. And just a few weeks ago, the legislature was trying to roll it back. And even if they hadn't rolled it back, it turns out there's been hardly any charging stations built in Massachusetts even since it's passed. So I'm not trying to make you angry with the Democratic Party or hate the Democrat. What I'm trying to say is you can see where one could be disappointed or cynical or whatnot with these set of facts. So now I got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is, I think that the things we're talking about are true. Like, I think we aren't living up to our values, right? We're not doing the things many of us think we should do. The good news is, I think maybe many of us, most of us, all of us here believe that there are solutions to these problems and that they're not easy, but they're there. I mean, realistically, it's hard for states to solve all their problems perfectly. They are constrained by their budgets. If they raise their taxes too high, there will be capital flight and people with money will move to other states. We see this stuff. So, there are limits, but I think, I think we could be doing better, and I think the evidence suggests we could be doing better, and I suspect many of you feel the same way. So the big question here is, what is stopping the non-authoritarian party, the Democrats, from delivering these good solutions? What is sapping the state's will to serve the public good and the state's capacity to do it when the will is there? Because the opportunity doesn't get much better than this. I think the Democrats have over 80% of the legislature under their control. It's closer to 90% in the Senate, and it's really high. It's over 80% in the House, and we have a Democratic governor. This should be go time for good stuff. I know it's. So I think the answer to this is a word that we don't talk about too much these days. I think it's capture. Capture of our legislature and state institutions, basically. And it's subtle. It's not, it's not totally obvious. But when I say capture, what do folks? I know I'm being pretty vague. What do folks think about in a politics context, not like in a? Yeah. So just have at it.
I think it's an elected official. An elected official. I've never said this out loud, so I'm thinking which words work. Who is captured or attached to some preset conclusion, basically, based on affiliation, funding, almost to pay for play. But why would we say that about Democrats? But here we are. So they're captured, their interest is captured, their voting priorities are captured by something other than the people they represent.
Yeah, I think that's really well put.
I think when any party is in control for too long and too strongly, there's always a risk of what I first heard described watching the Shawshank Redemption, of being institutionalized, of making a way of doing business, of making certain decisions just built into the body. And that's a really strong, my sense is that's a strong thing in Massachusetts. We have our way of doing things, and we don't want anybody to move our cheese around, basically.
I want to agree with the other two very much. I'm going to say something in public that I feel that I am appalled when I hear more and more. I think there's actually, I don't want to say illegal, but nefarious stuff going on in our state house, possibly in the government, and the influence on, I mean, the Democratic State Committee is a mess. And if you try to explain it to anyone, I still can't explain it to anyone. So if I want to go and knock a door, become a Democrat, I can't explain what that means. When you brought up, I think very, very importantly, any government is governs the people, so it's of the people. It's not by the people, and it's not for the people. It's not a democracy here now. And in order to change it, I think there's got to be systemic change, different constitution, and so on. I mean, and so yes, it's embedded, but it's also really, really full of money. There's pay to play going on. And there's people, the politicians once in there, I'm not saying when they get elected, they feel that way. There's some wonderful people that go into it, and they are just railroaded into, if they don't go along with whoever's running it. And we've had this in Massachusetts for a very long time, but it is absolutely toxic now, apparently. We get no bills passed. The important ones are tabled forever, on and on. The more I hear about the details from people who are there, who whisper it, because they think I won't talk about it, I guess. I won't mention their names. But I think it's real, and there are organizations very actively going to do something. I'm taking the microphone now because I do want everyone, I think everyone here does know about the crack in the foundation that the convention, where they threw out the new platform. But the platform's always been ignored completely anyway. Thank you, ranked choice voting, which has been in the platform for how many years? I mean, a while.
Yeah, since 2017.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, yeah.
All right. So I'm getting poked. So I probably said all I need to right now.
If you want to understand the fundamental flaw of how Democrats have used their power, there is an article that you should read by Glenn Thrush. It is called Locked in the Cabinet. It was published in maybe 2014, so Obama was still president, and it is all about risk aversion. And it uses two issues that were familiar to many Americans at the time that are totally different. And the first one was the rollout of Obamacare. If people remember, not the debate about passing the law, the rollout, the websites crashed, the pricing was all wrong. They had to delay the start of it by like 6 months, despite the fact that you were mandated by law to have already picked. It was a disaster. The rollout of that plan and Obama's decisions with regards to the Syrian crisis. Now, Syria, war in the Middle East, and a healthcare website rollout, two totally different things. And yet, Glenn Thrush does this amazing job of illustrating actually the total failure of the Obama administration that runs through every issue can be perfectly explained doing those two things. And the issue is risk aversion. There was a thought that Obama was taking over after George Bush. George Bush's management was terrible, right? Nothing George Bush executed was done well. You may agree with his policies, you may disagree with his policies. At the end of his, at the election, he was polling at 28%. Nothing he did was executed well. Even Republicans agree with that. Obama believed that if you just managed well, which he did, the Democrats would continue to win. And as a result, you never made a mistake. You never took a risk. You never said, hey, this policy will work, but it will cost you more money. or hey, we can generate wind power in the United States and power the whole state, but yes, you will see the windmills from the beach. No risk at all. And that no risk at all travels through all the way down to your local level. We don't make decisions that sound bold or risky because of the potential negative feedback.
Boy, nobody can shred Democrats.
Sorry, have we gone on too long? Yeah, it's a simple question.
worries.
I was just gonna, well, thank you for this, making these points. I really appreciate it. I think it's brave and I really appreciate it. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, I don't think you should be afraid to bash the Democrats. And I think it's really an important point. It's the key point. It's what everyone needs to be talking about. And I would say, you know, there's reports even from the federal level of the DNC, people with insider knowledge describing it even now as a racket, as completely corrupt, devoid of any principles, basically just a fundraising machine that is extremely profitable. I mean, they spent over $1 billion in 110 days. Where did that go? I think it's also, you know, ideological, if you could call that ideology or a lack of ideology. It's completely captured by this devotion to money and power, and this idea of that we need to have a big net, a big, what do they call it? A big tent is nonsense. And what we need is more ideology, more commitment to what's actually popular. Medicare for all is supported by 80% of the base. Majority of people don't want to be funding genocide. So you could have a real conversation about what is authoritarianism when the party is not responding to their base, and what kind of, where do we, yeah. What is the big tent of authoritarianism here?
All right, well, that was a lot of really, really powerful thoughts there. And really, thanks for kicking us off with a really good description of capture as well. Really mature and in-depth, and thanks everybody really enriching that discussion. Getting back to capture, a lot of people would, you know, that when you talk about corruption or capture, they immediately think about money in politics, Citizens United, stuff like that, which of course plays a big role. I mean, that's an appropriate thing to think about, but I think as you began describing and others continued to paint here, it's capture is, there's a lot more to it. It permeates a lot of different institutions. It's omnipresent, it's subtle, and it works in ways to, as the gentleman here was describing, lead to decisions being constrained in ways or approaches taken that just happen to align with the needs of powerful interests. So, I want to say that it's a problem. So it becomes so obviously money in politics is a big problem, but it is also a problem if we see capture narrowly just as money in politics, because for a few reasons. One is it is in fact more than that. It'll take more to fix it than just, you know, fixing, you know, reversing Citizens United. It was a problem before Citizens United as well. And again, like it is an important problem. Like I want to see Citizens United overturned. Our friends at American Promise are working hard now. They're up to 23 states for a constitutional amendment like this to allow states to re-regulate money in politics. Massachusetts, congrats to folks here who may have worked with American Promise and others to pass a ballot measure that's got Massachusetts already there saying, calling for that constitutional amendment. But there's more to it. So in the short term, it's very hard to fix money in politics. And a lot of activists have sort of consigned, I think because of that, have consigned the notions of capture and corruption to that bucket of things we can't control. So we've got our serenity prayer hats on. It's like, let me understand what I can control and focus on the things I can't control, focus on the things I can control. And so they may stop thinking about capture, but when you lose that thought process, when you lose that lens, it may negatively impact how we prioritize other things we are doing. So what I'm trying to say here is that if we address capture, we can go, even without solving the Citizens United problem, we may be able to get a decent towards way solving many, maybe not all, of the problems we have here in Massachusetts. And maybe we can fix things to the extent where we can demonstrate in Massachusetts a model of liberalism that, to the person in the front row here said, in fact, works of, by, and for the people. So liberalism doing what I think everyone in this room believes it should do, create government of, by, and for the people. And if we do that, then we'll have a compelling alternative to MAGA. Yes, it's important that we're resisting, super important. I'm not going to argue, it's the most important thing right now, and you guys are leading that and doing a great job. But if we don't solve these things, and there's public frustration, there's always going to be the danger that it turns back in this bad direction that we're dealing with. And so I think we need to walk and chew gum as well, or at least some of we need to have both things happening. Not everybody has to do everything, but we need to build this culture of knowledge amongst us of what we need as an overall strategy, and I think this needs to be part of it. And the goal being demonstrate that model of liberalism. Yeah, Massachusetts isn't the whole country, but like I said, I was in software for 20 years. The industry went through a bunch of changes while I was in it. And when you change how people are working, sometimes in industry speak, they call it change management. Like, you're let's say you're a director or a manager in a company, and you realize your company's not doing things as effectively as they could. And it's maybe very structural in terms of how your businesses are aligned. Like a big thing when I was in software was we were going from what they called matrixed organizations to agile organizations. And maybe some of you folks are in tech and that means something to you as well. But that was making that transition, there were good things about it. In the short term, it involved changing people's roles and responsibilities and, some redistribution of who had power over what, and so change is hard for people. And but some of the insights of change management coming out of different milieus is lean into the early. Basically, there'll always be people who are more eager for change. They're like all about it, right? It's like we could be doing something better. Let's make it happen, yeah. And a lot of people there's gonna be another groups of people that are more change resistant. They're like, well, I'm skeptical of change because we've been doing this way a long time for a reason. And then there's kind of fence sitters that kind of just want to see how it's going to shake out. Well, what the folks in industry found, and I think it shows up elsewhere, is that if you pursue a change management model which leans into the energy of the early adopters, and you go with your most excited people, most capable folks, and in terms of the type of democracy stuff we're talking today, I can't think of any group more capable or excited than Massachusetts, and especially the folks, affiliated with Indivisible in the base of the Democratic Party in Massachusetts. Great values, care about this stuff, lots of energy, smart people. You lean into that, and they make it work. It doesn't work instantly. They gotta work through it, implement it, work the kinks out. But when they got something, if it's a good thing, it might work really well. And then when you have that shining example of how you can do that change that gets you to a much better place, now the fence sitters are like, there's not much fence to sit on. They're like, yeah, like, duh, like, why wouldn't we do that? See, they did it. It works. So all this to say, your work in Massachusetts is important, even if initially it just affects Massachusetts. So back to, connecting the dots again, addressing capture is a key component, I'm stating, of fighting authoritarianism. It is good for our lives in general. Let's talk about how we can fight it. And I kind of got ahead of myself here. I was going to say, I want to talk about, before we talk about how we can fight it, where we can fight it. So let's do a little multiple choice question for the group here. Where can we fight capture most effectively right now? It's going to be 4 choices. A is going to be Texas, B is going to be South Dakota, C is going to be Pennsylvania, and D is going to be Massachusetts. Exactly. Why? Why can we be most effective in Massachusetts? Exactly. I mean, you folks are important. The Democrats are in power. Their values are aligned, I think, with these good things, right? I think values-wise, there's a lot of alignment. You guys play a critical role within that party, helping them, do what they need to do to win elections. And yeah, 100%, we're here. Yeah, you answered all. Yeah, you guys got it. All right, that was easy. Okay, so we have the party that's the standard bearer for our values and power. We talked about this. We have a wealthy state, we passed a millionaire's tax a few years ago. Now, notably, that was not the legislature passing that millionaire's tax. It was you people passed a millionaire's tax, which has given the state a lot more ability to solve problems, at least theoretically. If we can't make things work in a wealthy state with great values, with a party committed to those values, it's hard to imagine how we make them work anywhere. So, so we already talked about. Sorry, I was a little repetitive. I was just putting. So why? So capture's holding us back. And let me just speak a little about capture, because some people, especially, like, what capture? Because it's really hard to see. And I don't know, folks listen to podcasts or whatever, but there's a new idea going on. I'll call it new, whatever. It's kind of in the zeitgeist out there. There's folks talking about this thing called abundance, like the idea that we could do better addressing problems of building more housing, lowering the cost of housing. The government should do better at building things like, if we want to build transportation systems, we should be better at building railroads. Those shouldn't be, these boondoggles that just absorb infinite amounts of money and take forever and whatnot. And it's liberals talking to liberals, people like Ezra Klein and whatnot, talking to people like us. And they're good points. I mean, they're raising some points like about, some of the different ways we could regulate things differently so that it would be less difficult to build stuff or allow government to deliver the services that we would like government to deliver. And because I think it is eye-opening for a lot of liberals and progressives, I certainly have learned a lot listening to them. And it sounds like something, I don't know, you can raise your hand if you disagree, but it seems like something that just about everybody, even Republicans, Democrats, whatever, could get behind. Like, okay, oh, yep.
Sorry, you told me to raise my hand if I disagreed.
Oh, good, I appreciate it. Well, it's good to have different perspectives on this stuff.
Yeah, I think that the Abundance Project is funded by billionaires, and I think there's a reason for that. I think that it's very undetailed, and there's a reason for that. It's basically a branding exercise to rebrand neoliberalism, to confuse people, and to prevent change, is what I think. I think of course, we need more housing, but they have no prescriptions for how to make it, who's going to build the housing, where it's going to be built, how we're going to socialize it, how we're going to control the financialization of housing, which is the real reason why housing isn't affordable. Just to say to deregulate things is complete nonsense.
All right, great point. Hey, Mitch, you didn't tell me we're going to have like a policy person from the governor's office here today, all right? That's a super good point, and thanks for speaking out about that. And I think there are definitely elements of truth to that, like in terms of like who's latching on to it. Why? I believe that some of the people advocating it do believe in it for good reasons, but I also agree with what you're saying, that a lot of the people amplifying it are seeing it as a way to sort of like rescue the neoliberal tradition or whatnot. So I think those are fantastic points. What I would say, I guess what I would invite us to think about is, though, like, part of me is pretty skeptical. So Boston's a pretty wealthy city. The real estate there is very expensive. the ownership of that real estate and the incoming rents from it is pretty concentrated. Like, you know, I think Ezra Klein really does care about this. I'm not convinced that we're going to see a policy change in this, at the state legislative level or in Boston that will just sail through based on this any common sense thing without the folks who, I don't think those folks that own all that stuff are going to be too excited about lowering the cost, the value of their stuff, right? So I think this notion of capture, all this to say is like even good ideas, or if you think they're good ideas, and can get, you know, sunk on the rocks of this capture thing. And so thank you so much for speaking up about that. Like I think it's a really important perspective to hold. All right. So again, so getting back to capture, so is I think someone in the front row here was saying, or Stephanie was saying, we've got essentially one-party political domination in Massachusetts now. It's really concentrated power. And weirdly, this is kind of made possible by kind of a good thing in a way. Like in Massachusetts, we do have a really strong consensus around some very positive values. And I think the Democratic Party speaks to those. I think there's good things about the Republicans as well in some of their values, but there's a lot of great values that Democrats represent, and I think they're able to capitalize that and dominate state politics in a lot of ways. And that combines, though, with if we have time to talk about, we can talk about kind of an antiquated electoral system that kind of makes a winner-take-all system. So if, you know, 60% of the folks like the Democrats' values better, align more with them, we get almost all Democrats, and that's pretty much what we're seeing. But the other thing about our voting system, and without getting into too much detail, is it creates this two-party dynamic, and it kind of locks out new voices and innovation. So I think raise your hand if you vote for the Democrats 95% of the time or more. And raise your hand if you vote for the Republicans, I don't know, even 30% of the time. Okay, so the way it works, especially with these polarized national politics we have, is like what you're saying, like most people will vote for one of the parties, but never for one of the other ones. And if a new party with new ideas comes out, like there's no incentive for talented people to invest their time or political stakeholders to invest money or resources because they're going to be treated as outsiders who are just spoiling our system. And so as a result, we're stuck. If you are a Democrat, you've got one choice. If you lean Democratic, you have one choice, and if you're a Republican, you effectively have one choice. And that is a real, in terms of capture, like what it would look like if you had more choices. Let's say there was like a sort of, think of the factions within the Democrats, and maybe some of you have different factions that you like. Maybe there's like the Mamdani people and the progressives, or the abundance people, and maybe there's, you name it, they're all different factions in the party. What if some of those factions could have their own party, and when there was a feeling that the Democratic Party wasn't kind of operating with the integrity and effectiveness that we expect from it, what if you could vote for one of these other ones? With that, raise your hand if you think that would make the Democrats in Massachusetts a bit more accountable to delivering for Massachusetts voters. What's that? Yeah.
You have to change the electoral system to make anything like that happen, which choice voting may have done.
Exactly. Yeah, that type of, it does. So yes, to agree with what she's saying, like to get a multi-party system, you need an election system that supports multiple parties. So that's one thing that's, so this is what I was talking about in terms of like capture is about money and money in politics, but it's not just about money. Like it's pretty surprising, like Bernie Sanders almost won the Democratic Party nomination. Now he did also raise a lot of money, but he didn't start with a lot of money. Zoran Mamdani got outspent, by a lot in New York just now, and he won. Now, they do have public election financing there, which helped. They have ranked choice voting, which also helped. But my point is, money's not everything. And if you can open it up so more Mamdanis can be heard. If you take away the public financing and the ranked choice voting in New York, do you get Mamdani? I'm not sure you do.
I think we are captured by the idea of parties, period. You know, the concept of political parties goes back to when people would load up their horse or donkey and travel for days to go to a convention. The ticket platform, an era where people couldn't read. The political party as an entity is a completely obsolete, extremely idea. And we have become completely holden to that. You know, I think if you have ranked choice voting, I don't see it as a cure-all, because I still think you're going to see most people rank that Democrat or that Republican as number one, and I think you're going to see the mechanisms of power unite around making sure that happens. You know, a couple of Tuesdays ago, progressives had their best election in generations. Worcester, Massachusetts, a very liberal place, the center of central Massachusetts progressive movement right now, had their worst year for their worst election for progressives in decades. The reason is because the people who are actually in power, the union leaders, the business leaders, the Democratic town committees, those people all voted. The primary is, you know, people aren't participating in primaries, they're not participating in off-season elections, and they are still uniting behind those parties. And I think, you know, I'm encouraged by what happened with Mamdani, but I think that is an aberration more than a rule. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think I like that concept of ranked choice voting, and I did like a testimony through the Maple thing or whatever. So just like I think the Democratic Party, I think in a way has as a young Democrat that just, you know, joined as a member last year, and I've been politically involved, but now to the extent of learning, my capacity has changed like just within a year around understanding kind of this leadership kind of role that that's in play in Massachusetts. But I think I think that in terms, like I hear your comment, Terry, about like it was one of the worst, movements for Worcester in a bunch of years. And, I wouldn't go tit for tat around like, really that concept. But I think there's just a lot of ageism. And I think that we're not really, people aren't really excited with the choices. Like I wasn't even excited. I mean, we have Mayor Petty and then Christian King. Like when I went to the Christian King, I'm not going to go to that, but like, I didn't really see a person that was any different than Mayor Petty. Like I saw someone that was wearing a Bermudian pin, which I just traveled to Bermuda, and it's illegal to have gay marriage in Bermuda, and he was wearing that the Bermudian pin during a women's pride committee event. And so for me, when I went and shared and disclosed that information, it was just like, oh, well, you're not consistent enough. You're new to the you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, for me, it's like, there's no room for my voice to be a leader in Worcester. And it's been like, I work in the nonprofit sector, and it's just constantly like, I just went to a CMHA meeting there, And it's like I had to like go into the space and be like, oh no, I'm just a boots on the ground caseworker. Like I'm not even supposed to be in this kind of space, right? So it's like, not only does it, it's not an accessible system, but it's not really an empowering system, to be quite honest. And so even with ranking choice, when I think of that word, I think of the word like ageism right away. And it's like, how can I even be a leader in the movement if I didn't show the consistency that's required, which is like years of dedication, and that still I don't think is really, I think Zoran, I think he was able to really articulate and had people behind him, and it's like picking and choosing people, and it's really like, you know, I don't think it's accessible, you know, and I think regardless if it's ranked choice, whatever, yeah, I'm gonna keep going. I'm still here to learn, and I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, I would encourage you to learn more about ranked choice voting and how it does make progressive choices a lot more possible. I do think it's true that when you have a first past the post system, it preemptively incentivizes people to make conservative choices, to vote for the person that has the most money, the most name recognition, the most power. And when you have ranked choice voting, it really opens up coalitional politics within your side of politics. Oh, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't get too hung up on that. I think that what's important is what it actually does. And in Worcester, what they have there is actually not party politics. You don't run on a party. So that's not the problem. What you have is actually the all-party primary that they're trying to promote right now, which is actually quite anti-democratic, and it makes it very expensive to run for office. And you know, the top however many people get the vote, that is actually, if we didn't have that and instead we had ranked choice voting, I think that we could get a lot more done in Worcester. So I would encourage you to keep learning about it.
All right, well, thanks everybody for sharing that.
I can talk loud. It's okay. It's very short, but we're not going to get ranked choice voting right away. Can you get well, all right, I'll yell into the microphone then, right? But now I've got to get my thread back. What I'm seeing, and I don't know, maybe I'm hallucinating, okay? But I think we've got the Mamdanis around. I think we've got enough of them. If we actually just find them, I know some. And some of them are willing, knowing that they're going into a system that, like you're talking about, no one will listen to them. They don't care. They're going to speak out. We're talking Gen Z and millennials. And they could be some very old people who can speak just as well as Bernie Sanders, because he's doing just fine, thank you. And Robert Reich, you know, like, it's not about the age, but the thing is there's also this visible energy with a lot of the younger people. And this is their world. I mean, in 5 years from now, whatever, the Gen Z is going to be millennials, the millennials will be old crocs trying to get their kids through college, you know. But the thing is that they're there. This is the exciting part. And they just have to be surrounded and given, you know, like put stuff in, you know, like whatever you need to do. It's not just money, it's just encouraged. They want to do it. They're on fire, the ones that are there. You got to recognize them. They come in all flavors, you know. They're walking the streets. They're, you know, all colors and everything. But I think that's there. And the Democrats are doing nothing about finding them because the stodgy There's one more thing about Democrats I want to say, because it's not that I'm negative, but I'm not always optimistic and positive. I hear nothing but happy talk, basically, even out of people who are in despair that are Democrats. They can't say anything negative, and so you can't look at what happened, the Biden stuff, all of that. It's well known, a lot of us know it, but you can't actually say it like at a bigger meeting. You have to always say, but we really didn't do that badly, and look at these positive things. You do have to actually admit you were in software. Once in a while, there's a bug that got to get fixed. And the freaking software, with the Obama, I have a story about that I won't tell right now, but it's very interesting because completely young people that I know in California, I will tell the story, just to talk about young people. Stop poking me. The reason is, this is just an example, okay? You know the Obamacare, you brought it up. I'm going to link to that. There's something called, I'm not getting the name right, it's something Sherpa. Friends of mine's kids were starting a real estate or some kind of company in California. 3 went to school together, right? And they're doing this, and they have to provide health care for their little company. And they noticed that it's really hard to find out what to do. It's obscure. So they're going to do the Obamacare thing, finding that it doesn't work, okay? And they have some employees that they're hiring. Okay, so they sat down, and over a weekend, what they discovered was the database that the Obamacare was based on was public. Every company, every insurance company in the country was in a database. Over the weekend, they wrote a front end to that so that you could find, you didn't have to put your name in. The thing you didn't get was your name in. But what you could do was find wherever you were, you put in your stuff, and I got this much income, and you were anonymous. You didn't have to sign your name. And it popped out, here's each viable computer company. And this guy wound up the next weekend on CNN for 20 minutes. And any state, of course, Massachusetts was using Obamacare as a model, and so they were excluded. But any state that wasn't using Obamacare as their model could use this. And it was done over a weekend. And I somewhere have the CNN clip of this. It's just an example of what can happen if, and they're still among us.
Yeah.
So if we get them, even in this, what you were talking about, the ballot initiative for, the jungle primary, even if we have that, if we have the right people running, I think it's going to show up. And there's plenty of social media to get the word out without too much money.
Yeah, so this is great stuff. I want to wrap up pretty soon. You guys have been really patient listening to me talk today. Usually Mitch said, oh, you could talk for 60 or 90 minutes. I'm like, are you sure? But you folks have been great. So good thoughts there. So how to fix this, right? Let's just wrap up with happy thoughts. How can we fix this? So I think the things that you're already doing, educating, organizing, advocating, getting people to challenge in elections that stand for the changes that you think need to happen. So there's a lot there, but I appreciate today that we were able to come and talk about some of the nature of the problem, talk about capture, talk about why this problem is important and how it connects to our desire to not live in an authoritarian country. I love, what's your name in the front row there? What is your name? Alice. I love Alice's point about that we could do this, and we could do so many of these things. It feels like it doesn't feel like it's mission impossible to do a ton of this stuff. So I want to wrap up. I guess if you want to talk about, like, my background, you know what I work on. I guess what I would say is there's a number, some of the things that I think go to address the things we talk about. The folks have brought up some of the ballot measures. There's some great ballot measures that are on the ballot this year. Some are no-brainers. I think some of them, like you guys are talking about the all-party primary, I think you could make a case they could be really good. They're not perfect, so they have downsides as well. I think that's something that's worth discussing. But I guess we'd say there's kind of two categories to the fixing. There's some things related to fixing structural things, some things related to fixing like access to elections, like there's a election day voter registration ballot measure, which is pretty cool. Get more people's voices in there. You're talking about Worcester and how low the turnout is, and how that creates vulnerability, because if you have an organized interest group and they marshal a small group of supporters, they can be decisive because there's less people turning out. So some of it's on the election side. Some of it, there's a great organization in Massachusetts now called, which is kind of brought together a number of different organizations that we're working at. It's a truly bipartisan effort now. It's called Coalition for CROL, C-R-O-L, Coalition for Reforming Our Legislature. They're all about improving the integrity of the workings inside the State House. So they have a ballot measure around stipend reform. Right now in Massachusetts, like the power is concentrated in the House Speaker. The House Speaker of Massachusetts, Ron Mariano, is the most powerful, politically powerful person in Massachusetts. And if you're a special interest trying to do influence, you do it. A lot of that happens through the Speaker's office. No legislation passes through the House without the Speaker signing off on it. And so one of the ways he maintains control and maintains that power, whoever it is, whether it's him or DeLeo before him or the guy before him or the guy before him, is they have this mechanism where they determine what legislators serve on what committees, and they receive stipends, payment for being on a committee, and some of the committees pay more than their base salary, for one thing. So that's just one measure. Now I'm not trying to say, like someone was saying, there's a lot of good people in the legislature, but that's just one piece of it. The other piece of it is when the Speaker controls how people vote, basically, controls enough of a critical mass, if you don't go along, even if you don't care about the money, you have the integrity, you don't want money, but you represent, let's say, Northborough or whatever, Westborough, Southborough, they might be like, well, you vote with us or you're not going to get the earmarks. You're not going to get the project. Your city's not going to, your town's not going to, your district's not going to get the money back they sent to the state for projects for your state. So all this to say, there's fixes on the ballot. They're not complete, but they're good, really good steps. There's the auditor, DiZoglio, has a records reform ballot measure that will increase transparency of public records. There's a few others, but at any rate, I will also say on the ranked choice voting stuff, someone said we're not going to get to one. That's probably true. However, there's a really effective, a really strong group of folks like yourselves who are working to advance it at the local level. And what we're finding is, we just had a great hearing. Thank you for writing some written testimony. Over 100 people, including you here, wrote testimony, and thank you so much. We're going to have a video of the people who were there giving testimony in person. It's very powerful. There's like 10 cities or towns that said, hey, listen, we just asked you to do this, and all we're asking you is to let us do something that the people in our town want to do. And I think we're making progress there. So there's also some good legislative advocacy stuff. I know folks here may be involved with there's a hearing this past week around ICE-related stuff. What was that for? What bill that was that for? So there's important things to press on. What's that? The safety. Yes. So at any rate, that's not in the same class as the other thing. That falls more in the resisting authoritarian bucket as opposed to the other piece, but thank you. I want to wrap up. Thank you for everything you're doing. The last thing I'll say is I'm available. Mitch can give you my contact information. If you'd like to share your contact information with me, I can add you to some of the mailing lists of Voter Choice Massachusetts and whatnot. And I would also like to extend, when I was talking to the DTC recently, it occurred to me, let's keep in touch and share what we're doing and also how we're doing it. There's some tools that Voter Choice Massachusetts and Rank the Vote are using. and Partners in Democracy, who I was representing last time I spoke to you guys, that can help with your advocacy and organizing and education efforts, whether it's voter file or texting or which you may already have access to. If you have access and are not using it because you need training, let's talk about that. If you need money, let's talk about how you can raise that money. There's also things like Maple, which Partners in Democracy has helped invest in. It's, what is your name in the front row on the left here? I'm sorry, Global Citizen. What is your name? Chrissy? So Chrissy submitted testimony. You submitted it through that Maple website? Maple Testimony. It's a website that makes it a little bit easier for citizens to submit testimony, share it with other people so other people can see what other citizens are thinking. So it's not just you in the legislature, it's you in the community and the committee. And so if you're not using that for your advocacy efforts, whether for safe communities or other things, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to. We got to share our best practices, and I may be picking your brain to figure out how you guys are doing all these great rallies and whatnot and building this great community of active folks. So I want to thank you very much, and I apologize for going a little bit over. Have a super rest of your Sunday.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Thanks so much, Nathan. I think there are probably a couple of additional follow-up questions or comments. Is this microphone still doing its thing? I can't. Okay.
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to make sure I get this in because I did hear that you were promoting the all-party primary, and I was very confused and concerned, frankly, because there's a lot of evidence that it's actually anti-democratic. It will make it harder for us to get the progressives and the third parties that actually represent us to get elected, and it's completely antithetical to the ranked choice voting efforts. And I have here printed out letters that a lot of grassroots groups led by people of color wrote to this group, spelling out in detail why this is a bad idea and to please not do it, and they didn't hear back. It includes Progressive Mass and a bunch of other groups. This effort is also funded by a Pritzker billionaire investment group, and I just want to make sure I get this message out there that this is not a good idea for combating authoritarianism. The all-party primary will make it more expensive. It doesn't get rid of the first-past-the-post system, and so it will favor more Republican wins and more conservative Democrat wins, and will do nothing for example, the Green Party, the National Party for the Greens has explicitly on their platform that they do not support these kinds of primaries, and for some reason the Massachusetts Green Party has endorsed it, and I do not know what's going on there, but I encourage everyone to learn more about this because I'm concerned. I'm concerned that this is distracting from ranked choice voting, frankly.
Anybody else before we close up? Nathan, thank you very much again. Here, let me come up to the.
I'd be happy to speak to that as well, but I don't, you know, if, so what is your, I'm sorry, what was your name? Oh, nice to meet you, Emily. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. And you're right, there's a debate amongst people who agree on a lot of things about the all-party primary, and it's something I had to think about. It's not ranked choice voting. I guess a couple things I would say, and I totally respect what you're saying. I think, like, and you're right, you certainly should have your ears perked up. What she's saying about a lot of the progressive organizations not supporting this is absolutely true. And what she's saying about it being funded by some very wealthy folks is also very true. Well, I guess what I would say is, and it's not my first choice of election reforms if I had to rank them or whatever. But I guess what I would say with this particular change is, so there's a lot of pieces to elections, and one of them is like your ability to, you know, even get on the ballot and run for something. So one of the folks who's been working hard to get this on is a Harvard professor named Danielle Allen, who you may remember, ran for governor a few years ago. And she was kind of a newcomer to the Democratic, to active participation in running for office. She's not a newcomer to democracy. She's a democratic theorist and has been writing about, you know, the Declaration of Independence and what it means for us and whatnot for for decades. So in my opinion, she's got a lot of integrity as a person. She found the barriers, like there's a 15% rule. She was running for governor. So for I think for some of our state executive offices and for Senate, there's a rule where you have to get 15% of the delegates in convention in order to get on the ballot. And I think that highlighted, kind of a level of inaccessibility in terms of being able to get new voices in, which for her was a big deal. You're absolutely right that in terms of where it's performed, where it's been in place, it's had mixed effects. In California, there are cases where it's been problematic. So you might be like, well, why the heck do you still support this after saying all this stuff? I guess what I would say is, we have to also look at what we have now. And the question for me is it better or worse than what we have now? And the things like being able to manipulate the primaries is a problem now. It's a problem under the all-party primary. So it's not an entirely new problem. California is kind of a weird case in that I don't think it's having all the impact it could in California. And many will say it's had some impact. It certainly hasn't hurt Democrats' ability to compete in California. But there's some evidence that it's decreased polarization. I'm not totally sure. But I guess what I would say about California is their state Senate, they have a very small legislature compared to Massachusetts, and it's a very big state. So their state Senate districts are, I believe, larger than their congressional districts. And their state rep districts are roughly, I think, over half the size of a congressional district. So I guess at this point, given the level of control in the legislature, given the challenge what I'm seeing in Massachusetts of the kind of new voices consistently breaking through, and even just fundamentally the ability to challenge the speaker's power in Massachusetts, I would very respectfully have a slightly different take than, other people that I have tremendous respect for doing amazing work, that I totally support their work on this, because I feel like this isn't the initiative I would choose if we had the money to, if it was, I could wave my magic wand, but someone's willing to pay for it. And despite, I think I understand why the people who are willing to pay for it are willing to pay for it, and they're not the same reasons that I would do it. But I personally am supporting it because I think it will have a positive impact in increasing competition, especially for state legislative seats, which currently are very uncompetitive. Like very few people, like 50% plus since 2014 of the elections for state legislature have been completely uncontested.